Today's guest is Shalabh Gupta, a visionary leader and accomplished entrepreneur with extensive experience navigating the public and private markets. As the CEO of a public company, Shalabh has first-hand insight into the challenges and opportunities of operating in the public sphere. With a mission-driven approach, he's focused on solving critical problems through innovation and driving long-term value for shareholders. Shalabh joins us to share his journey, offer lessons learned from his lead in a public company, and provide a glimpse into what's next for his business and industry. Shalabh, could you give our audience any more additional information of your career, your accomplishments up to this point before we dive into the very challenging questions I have in store for you today?
So, Sean, thanks for having me. It's nice to be here. By way of background, Sean, I am trained physician, practiced medicine for a decade. I was a faculty and attending physician at NY School of Medicine and Biomedical Center. Took care of patients. I have a finance degree as well. I started my career after finishing my medical training, working for an investment bank called, it was at the time called Rodman Renshaw. I covered small mid-cap biotech companies, went to work for UBS covering large-cap pharma companies. So I understand what it is or how investors think about public markets and how public stocks are traded in terms of what are the inflection points, what are the value creation, and what data can help an investor feel more excited and more enthusiastic about the company and the stock. I then went to work for Genentech and Corporate Strategy Group, which is a biotechnology company here in Bay Area. And I started two companies prior to founding and starting this company. The company that I currently run is Unicisive, which is focused on treatment of kidney diseases. We have two drugs in development. One of our lead drug is now pending approval from the FDA, which, as you know, is a pretty exciting time for the company. And the second drug is for treatment of acute kidney injury, which we can talk about as and when. The second drug has finished phase 1 clinical trial. The lead drug is approval. So I started the company as the N of one and took the company on NASDAQ with as a single employee. N of one was fortunate to have had a chance to build the organization as well as raise significant capital from both during the IPO and after the IPO. And really excited to get to the finish line where the drug get to the patients, which is what we all live and strive for.
Shalabh, quick question there. Most companies seem to stay private as long as possible these days, but you did the opposite. You went public pretty early on. Why did you decide to go public instead of staying private like many of these companies for? Well, gosh, it seems like they never go public almost. Why did you decide to do that?
I think one of the important consideration of going public or remaining private is that I've done a seminar or presentation at Stanford about this. But in summary, if you were to pick the top 3 criteria why a company should be private and public, at the end of the day, what you need as an entrepreneur is access to capital, access to investors. If in your particular segment, in your particular industry, you have that broad access as a private company, then you should do that. In biotechnology, I felt that being a public company, we will give us broader access to the capital markets, which it did. Number 2 part is that it is also personal preferences for the management team. I understood and came from public markets. I think there, despite being sometimes inefficiencies because sometimes markets go up or down because of macroeconomic trend, in long run, I felt that it would be the right thing to do for the company. And the third thing is that, Sean, I think what I care most about is finding the right group of investors. I had some of the investors I got to know in my career, and I've been really, really fortunate to have had more investors on public market come and be a big name in our stock. So there is no one right size fits all formula here. One has to do what makes sense. That the key factor is that you need to have access to capital. You need to have right investors. And at the end of the day, whether you're private or public, it really doesn't matter because what most of us are excited about, the right incentive and goal is to build something that addresses the problem, because if you create value, you get rewarded for it, whether you're private or you're public. I think that is what it boils down to. It how you get to that. There could be different routes to get to the same destination.
Speaking of routes to get there, did you go public through a traditional IPO, a reverse merger, a SPAC? And why did you choose that particular route over the alternatives?
I went through a straight S1 filing, which is a straight IPO on NASDAQ. Sean, I had a very strong belief, because of a variety of experiences I had, that alternative paths seem lucrative, and sometimes they do work in short run, but they all have a, for lack of a better word, price to be paid. There was a time that the SPACs used to be the trend. In the SPACs, you're doing two sets of mergers. First, you merge with a SPAC, and then you have to go out and raise more money. I wanted to minimize the legal time, the necessary logistics that needed to be done. And as I said earlier, I was N of one. I wanted to focus my energy, time, and talking to the investors and creating value. For me, it was just harder. I don't mean that was the best thing for everybody, but I chose a straight S1 pathway. It is harder to take the company direct to IPO listing, but at the same time, the nuances around it is a lot more manageable.
Can you share some of those nuances, some of the steps that need to be taken with the S1 filing or the roadshow, or just, I mean, many of our listeners, they are founders of early stage companies and it is their dream one day to go public,
Yes.
but just going public versus all the steps that get there, most people don't know, have no idea what those steps are. Could you go into a little bit more detail of that process?
Yeah. So I always say to people that whether you want to be public or not, just think about it as a modular process. The reason I say, if I tell you that I took the company public, it seems a monumental task, which it is. But you can break it down into three main components. One is legal, the second is accounting or audit, and the third one is, as you pointed out, dealing with or working with investment bankers. Let's just start with legal. You or one could argue, I'm not a lawyer by background. So the question is that what is that work that needs to be done? There is a component that any entrepreneur can do it, which is writing a business section of your S1 document. S1 document is a securities document that requires financial as well as the business section, and they require risk factors. The business section, the best person to write is a management team. For me, I wrote the entire business section initial draft by myself. And it
How
was
long
a
did that take you to do?
took several weeks, but I used to force myself to just write down. If I could only write 4 pages, I would write 4 pages every day. And then some days I wrote maybe 10 pages, some days I didn't write any. But that disciplined approach helped me to be able to write a S1 business section. So that is a conversation you need to have your law firm, and hopefully you have a law firm that is taking companies public, and this is something they understand and they know it well. So I had a law firm that I had known the legal team for some time. They are very well versed with small mid cap company IPOs. So that was part one. Part two was related to just doing accounting and audit. Again, I'm not an accountant by background, but I know that in order to build systems for the company to be public, you need two prior years of full year audited financials. And I'm going to say, hopefully, it will not be too much of a complicated words use. But the audit requirement for a public company has to be PCOB, which is Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, PCOB audit. So it is not just an audit, but it has to be the highest standard possible audit. So I prepared those financials. And the third part is I had discussion with the investment banker, but I wanted to find a group of bankers whom I could work with. So you not only have to have a relationship with them because they are quote unquote service provider, but you truly have to think about them as your partner. You have a right legal partner, law firm. You have right accounting. If you're not doing all accounting in house, which we didn't, I didn't. So I hired a outside accounting firm to help us with getting the financials ready. But then you have to work with another audit firm that will help you with the audit. And the third thing is that working with your bankers. And fourth thing and foremost is the continuing while you're doing all of this, you continue to advance your product and continue to raise money. So
Actually, that's a great question right there. With a lot of founders aren't really sure if they've never raised capital before or gone through a transaction, the amount of hours that go into it. How difficult is it to run a business while running one of these processes?
it can be challenging. I have always talked about the prioritization for founders or anybody who's starting a company because the list of to do is not one page, it could run several pages long, can be very overwhelming for anybody. The way to keep your sanity is to ask yourself, what are the three most important things that I need to do today? Focus on the three things today and just ask yourself the question every day. Because if you look at the entire list of things to do, it can be, will be very overwhelming, So the idea is that just focus on the fundraising if you need the financing. It's an important number one. And if you need to continue to raise money, that will remain number one, but you still have number two and number three. But it gets better over time because if you are willing to take the feedback, both positive and negative, and keep on changing your pitch deck, how you tell a story, it can be a iterative process.
If you were to go back and do it again, would you go through a traditional the S1 filing and do everything the exact same, or would you go public through a different means? And what was kind of a key learning aha moment or that you took away from uh, going to the public market?
I think the first answer to your first question that yes, I will do S1 any day. I felt that it was a very straightforward process, harder, higher bar, but it's still a straightforward process because people have gone through the reverse mergers and so on and so forth. These are all different ways to get there, but for me, it worked. I like the streamlined process part of it, so I appreciated that. So I would do S1 IPO any day. The second question about the aha moment is that um, being a public company and being a CEO, you start to see there are many factors that you notice. It's about communicating to your investors, existing investors, being mindful about what you say, how you say in terms of your investor relation part, and just being on top of it, having the systems in place. It takes some time. So if you have a very big team, you've done it before, it's a lot easier. The aha moment for me was that even with the resources we had, it took us some time to establish all of them in place. And the requirements are requirements. There is no, if you're a public company or you trade on NASDAQ, you're a trade on NASDAQ, whether you have 5 employees, 2 employees, 2,000 employees, some of the requirements are similar. There is some leeway in terms of emerging growth companies and the larger companies, but some requirements are very similar.
Do you think companies will go back to going public earlier on? I think I remember the statistic. Amazon went public at a $35 million valuation. There was a lot of companies back in the day that their Series A would be them basically going public at that time, or maybe Series B, where now it's, as mentioned before, companies may never go public. Do you see it reversing back to kind of prior trends or not?
That's a harder question to talk very broadly because tech companies tend to remain private because access to capital is more in the private market and they tend to scale up. I also think the biotech companies, some of them have stayed more private, but I don't think it's a question about the is it the trend. Look, public markets also, people say there are open windows. Markets were easy in 21. They became much harder in 22 and 23. Right now, there is a window that seems to be opening up, but there are also macroeconomic headwinds. They relate to the political, geopolitical environment, interest rates, many factors that are outside your control. So I can't answer for an individual sector and CEO and the management team. But the most important part is that if you feel that you would have a broader access to public market and you can go public, I think you should think about doing it. On the other hand, being a public company comes with an extra set of burden, if you will. It's not just a question of the cost, but an extra attention that you need to pay to certain things that you don't have to pay if you're a private company. So
Go into
I
that.
can.
Can you share a little bit more about what the additional, I don't want to say effort or burden or just time, maybe time allocation is needed as a public CEO versus private CEO? Could you go into more detail about what that is?
One in particular that jumps at me is the context of being out talking to existing investors because the stocks, they just don't trade because you're intrinsically a very wonderful company. You have to talk to the investors and you have to provide guidance about what you expect next. And sometimes, even though we talk about the biotech companies that are focused on much longer time horizon, but there is still an expectation, rightfully so, to provide guidance on more frequent cadence. If you're a private company CEO, you provide your guidance to your key investor, but you don't have an obligation per se to go out and put it out to the broad market. You see that your time talking to broad investors is just more on as a public company CEO. That would be one big differentiation. Rest of the stuff we can parse and slice and dice it, but if you're a CEO, you have an obligation to communicate to your investors, whether it's your venture capital investors or your public investors. But the point I was making to provide guidance to the broader market on a more regular cadence and being speaking at different conferences is more common as a public company CEO versus a private company CEO.
Is there a difference in preparation for talking to public investors versus the private investors? I mean, I would think that the way information is shared and that there'd be a lot of coaching or preparation different for the two, or is it just coaching for the same?
I No, I think they are different, absolutely different. Because as a public company, you cannot share anything with one investor which you can't share with the broader market. The regulation, fair disclosure, Reg FT says that if you say to one, you say it to all. So you just have to be very mindful, no matter what question gets asked. And sometimes they're genuinely sincere question, but you can't really give a specific guidance. So that's just one very caveat. But other than that, I think if you are mindful of that and you have a very good understanding of what you have disclosed, which you should have at any given time, because you can't even wake me up from a sleep and I can't tell you anything which I won't tell the broader
Mm.
market. That's the discipline you need to have. And then other part is that public companies or private companies, investors want to know your story, your value proposition, how you're different. So some of those components are not different, whether you're private or public.
How should a CEO say they're thinking of taking their company public? It's at that stage, they're getting a lot of attention. How do they prepare themselves for becoming a CEO of a public company? How do they, I mean, do they work with a CEO coach for that transition? Do they just kind of go with the flow? How does one prepare oneself for that? Because I think it would be a pretty incredible jump, wouldn't it?
It will be. I think the best way to do one, which I've often advised some of the CEOs who come to me to ask me for this advice, is to start putting yourself. Some of the investor conferences they have almost all major investment bank have a private track. So start going to those conferences, and if you are one that aspire to take the company public a year from now, start attending those conferences, start speaking at those conferences, and most importantly, listen to other presentations where public company CEOs are talking and start to see what they're saying, how would you like to say? And that will start to give an idea about how to get this story out, what to say, what not to say. So that's on a communication part, but there is also just building up your team. Like, a public company, you will have to have a CFO, you will have to have a certain people, and the compliance part of it is also important. Whether you do in-house, you outsource it, you will need to have a compliance person to help you process that. And when I say compliance, I'm talking about legal compliance. But there are other things that are required as a public company to audit. Every quarter, you need to have your audited financials ready. You have to have a procedures ready for SOX compliance, Sarbanes-Oxley compliance. Some of them, it's just you even if you don't do it yourself, you need to know what they are.
And so, a quick question. I mean, well, actually, I got two questions. One, how long do you prepare for those big public events, meetings? And also, we haven't talked about the solution your company's solving and the strides that you're making. So I'd love to, don't share anything that hasn't been announced publicly yet, but I'd love to find out more for our listeners, a little bit about the problem you're solving and kind of the preparation for these public talks.
So the preparation to take the company public, I would say, give or take, was roughly 6 months. But Sean, I came from as an analyst, so I spent years in listening to the public company CEOs talk about it and interacting with them as an analyst on sell side to cover these stocks. So that was the preparation part of it. Again, different people have different lead time necessary for that. It also depends on what you have learned in the past. Regarding a solution that our company is solving, we are developing a treatment for patients who are on dialysis and have a high phosphate in their blood. Medically speaking, it's a disease called hyperphosphatemia, colloquially or more specifically, or in simple terms, it's just patients who have high phosphate. The overview of the problem is that patients who have high phosphate and they are on dialysis, they end up in dying because the phosphate combines with calcium and causes them to have thickening of their blood vessel, which is atherosclerosis. So essentially, these patients, because of their hyperphosphatemia, they end up in having increased risk of heart attack, cardiovascular mortality. And these are also the patients who end up in going to hospitalization. So the increased phosphate is a problem. Patients who are on dialysis takes care of all of the bad things from the blood, but the phosphate doesn't come out of the blood. So that is another thing that is to keep in mind. Our drug is a potential best-in-class drug that solves the problem by giving one small pill with each meal. Currently, existing solutions require patients to take 10 to 15 pills per day, and they take 3 to 5 pills with each meal. That's number one problem. There are solutions which provide them less number of pills, but the less number of pills are large size pills, and those large size pills have to be chewed. So those are the three problems: large number of pills, large size pills, and the large size pills are unpalatable or difficult to swallow because you have to chew those pills.
And quick question there with the company, I just thought of this a moment ago. The How do you balance the kind of short term pressure of the public market with the long term vision for your company?
You to tread the fine line because you have to focus on both of them. And I think the best way to focus is always ask yourself, what do I want to look 2 years down the road? Because that will help you the sort of a true north. And then you can navigate through the near term milestone. Look, day to day stock market, you can't really focus too much about it because some days markets are up, some days markets are down. But you cannot be oblivious to macroeconomic trend because that affects the access to capital, cost of capital, right?
Mm.
When the interest rates are lower, the cost of capital is cheaper, especially in equity market. But when interest rates are higher, the, it becomes difficult, right? Because it's an opportunity cost for investors to put in. So there are a lot of these factors that to consider. But ultimately, the most successful companies are the ones that are putting most of their efforts in creating the best products that solve real problems. So I think that is one thing I keep reminding people, whether you're private, public, whether you're whatever your short-term focus, long-term focus. At the end of the day, you have to focus on creating solutions that really, really solve the problem and creating those solutions the best that they could be, right? Because that is where the real value gets created.
Well, speaking of that, why did you pick this problem? I mean, you've had businesses in the past. You could have, I'm guessing, just said, "Hey, I'm just going to semi-retire or be an advisor or that." Why start this company? Why solve or work on this problem?
So people do different things for a different reason. I am trained physician. I feel that being able to bring our drug to market can help millions of patients all over the world. And it is a problem that can be solved. It's a simple solution, not very complicated to realize that if you're asking a patient to take 15 pills per day for the entire rest of their life, it is a real difficult task. Being a physician, being a clinician, also having done a lot of these conversation with physicians who treat kidney dialysis patients, because I'm not a nephrologist, I realized there was an opportunity to bring something, and then that opportunity, along with the team you build, then becomes a really interesting and meaningful journey. And then bringing that drug to market requires you to talk to the investors. So then everything you do becomes a process, but the goal starts from the something that you really feel inspired by. And Sean, for me, that is a really important question. I've talked about this in other places. Sometimes you ask the same question, which I say to people, that your why may be different than my why, but that why has to speak to you, because starting a company, running a company, building a product is hard. Why do it? Why not just do something else? Why not, take I don't mean in a bad way, just take a regular job, work in a bigger organization. Why do what you do? And you have to ask yourself. I think there is a fantasy that people have that is really cool to be an entrepreneur. And I think the more they talk to people, the more you realize it's a tough journey. It's not, I'm not trying to say that I want to discourage people, but it's a tough journey, because you are fighting many battles at the same time, you know.
Well, my question there then, what has been the toughest battle you've had to fight?
I think, the three goals that I mentioned is that, first of all, picking the right product is a key, right problem to solve. And you cannot come up with that right problem to solve by sitting in your conference room or sitting in your home or sitting at a Starbucks. So really, that's not how it works. You have to be able to talk to your customers. The customers can be physicians, customers can be patients. That problem is really meaningful. So that's if it starts with the problem statement. Then find a solution that truly addresses that problem. So that's the second part. If you get those two things right, a lot of other things become easier, and that takes time. And you may have I call preformed hypothesis, but you cannot get married to it too much. You have to really test the hypothesis. Is it really worth it? If I spend another 5 years of my life and hundreds of millions of investors' money, the thing that we create, will it solve the patient problem? And 5 years from now, what will be the standard of care? I'm talking very biotech, but the same thing is true. What happens if you develop a product 2 years down the road, where the world would be? Would you be too far behind? Would you have a solution that will stand the test of time? And then last part is, I think, especially in our industry in biotech, it's about intellectual property. Do you have the necessary IP, patents, or people call it the moat around your business that will protect you even if you spend hundreds of millions of dollars and years to develop it? Could you create that sustainable advantage?
Question on the patent wheel or the patent moat there. Do you find that companies focus on that too early or too late in their journey typically?
Successful biotech companies, they focus from very early on. Without that, they can't raise funding. And that is the biotech. Tech companies, again, are slightly different, because softwares are not always patented. And sometimes you don't want to patent software, because patents also mean that you are told the word how to make something, right? For biotech companies, because there are proprietary, techniques, and we call it something you patented, nobody else can make that molecule. So it's a different part. But successful biotech companies always they will have a patent portfolio that continues to advance as they go forward.
Do you think it's becoming easier to start a biotech company with AI, or do you think, or with the current ecosystem that's built out in Silicon Valley, or is it? Would you say it's becoming more challenging?
I think AI is a tool that has made a lot of things easier. There are many applications for AI for the biotech companies. For example, some folks are using AI for drug discovery. That's one aspect of the AI in biotech. Others are using AI for running clinical trials. That's the second aspect. There are AI tools available, and people are working on to figure out how to market their drug to the right customers, right physicians, right practices. But I think at the end of the day, it is going to require still focusing on the problem, because the problem, the patient problem, if you're developing a biotech company, is the key. And the drugs that you develop is the solution. Do you use AI to get to that drug? That is one way to do it. Or do you use traditional drug development to get there? That's another way to do it. I think AI has enabled a lot more people to get to that availability, just like internet did. Or today you and I can talk on a Zoom call or on a video call without having to sit next to each other. Same way AI has enabled some of these efficiencies, but has it translated in a huge inflection of biotech companies? I don't think so, not yet, at least.
What do you think is going to be the big changes or something to look forward to in the next 5 to 10 years in the bio in that whole sector? And what excites you in the coming years?
There are a lot of things which are very, very exciting. Precision medicine, people have talked about it. It's finding the right drug for right patient. The reason is that right drug for right patient also means that it's more efficacious, more effective drugs, and also less side effect profile. So sometimes we give the drugs thinking that every patient who is suffering from, for example, breast cancer is same. Today in oncology, that has already changed. We talk about triple negative breast cancer versus just a breast cancer. But the certain other fields of medicine, like nephrology, kidney diseases, that precision has not yet come, but it's coming. So that's one example of excitement. Number two is that I think as we know more about the genetics and how we can focus on other modalities. When I say modalities, these are drugs that are being developed that there used to be small molecule, large molecule, but there's cell therapy, gene therapy. The idea that if it becomes widely available, that you give one treatment and that takes care of that genetic disease for the rest of their life, is really, really meaningful. Question is, can you make it financially viable and scalable? That's something the industry is working on. And I feel very optimistic and excited we would have found those solutions in the next few years.
All right. And before wrapping it up, Shalab, if you had one lesson you could teach a younger yourself, what would that lesson be?
I think it takes time sometimes to find something that truly, truly, truly speaks to you. It's okay to take time to find that. I practiced medicine, and there I found that I wanted to work in biotech industry, and I spent a few different careers. So I worked as an analyst, a stock analyst. I worked in biotech industry, but some of these experiences were very specifically designed slash consciously decided that it will help me to understand that part of the business. So understanding that the career is not the next 3 years or 5 years, something that you think in longer time horizon. That's one advice. And the second thing is that you have to find something that you're truly, truly passionate about. It cannot be something that your friends tell you is the most exciting job. It has to be something that speaks to you, because the most important thing I can tell you, whatever you do will be hard. And in order to do something hard, you have to like it, because if you like it, that hard work will become not hard, becomes more of a joy or more of something that you want to do. And the harder you work on something you want to do, the easier it gets and the better you get. So I think the passion is one part, and looking at your career in more holistic way, not just focusing on next 2 3 years, but more longer term. What is that will truly give you joy, you know?
So that was fantastic advice. And if anyone wants to find out more information about you, your company, where would you direct them? What's the best way to learn more?
I'm on LinkedIn, Shalabh Gupta, MD. I'm on LinkedIn. Unicyc is a publicly listed company. It's unicyc.com. So all the information is on our website.
Fantastic. We're going to have those links in the show notes. And when I'm not the host of the Silicon Valley podcast, I'm an investment banker focused on mergers, acquisitions, growth capital. Connect with me on LinkedIn and go to our website, thesiliconvalleypodcast.com, to see all our past episodes. Look at our archives where we've interviewed some incredible people, such as the founder of Canva, Square, Intel Capital, list of VIPs. It's incredible. And with that, Shalabh, I'm so happy to include you in our list of interviewed guests on the Silicon Valley podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you for having me.